parable for you. A man slips at the edge of a cliff, and as he's falling, he grabs hold of a vine. He's holding on for dear life. He's fallen about 1,000 feet from the top of the cliff, and he's 1,000 feet from sure death. It seems hopeless. But in a moment of desperation, he cries out, "Is anybody up there?" After a long silence, a deep voice shouts from the clouds, "Do you believe?" "Yes," he cries out. "Then let go of the vine." He pauses for a second and says, "Is there anybody else up there?" This parable illustrates how hard it is to trust God. I mean, you'd think if you heard a voice that clear, you would do whatever it says. But in reality, we are always wanting to be in control. We're constantly trying to move things around to where things happen the way we want and to avoid circumstances we want to avoid. And it may be hard to see the connection at first, but this idea of desiring control is actually deeply connected to apathy, because sometimes what happens is when we cannot control the people around us, the circumstances around us, sometimes we just give up. We become apathetic. We become indifferent. When we don't believe that letting go or taking action will make a difference, then we respond with apathy. We become paralyzed. We hang on to the vine of apathy instead of embracing the true vine that is Jesus, through whom we can better understand our identity. We can be awakened to true life and encourage others to experience faith and love and hope. Apathy is a common experience for many. We can go through life feeling utterly indifferent to everything around us. Work feels pointless. Relationships seem shallow. Our faith might seem frail. And it's easy to become numb to the challenges that we face and the emotions that we feel because we're so overwhelmed. And it seems pointless to even try. We end up living on autopilot. A job we couldn't wait to get, suddenly we don't even want to go to. A marriage with the one we were so in love with suddenly feels more like roommates. The friend that was with you through thick and thin is so much more distant now. And it's important to note that even the super religious can live an apathetic life. The biblical root of apathy is found in the Greek word akadia, which translates without care or grief. And there was a season in the church where ascetics, the super religious, would leave all things to only be with God. But in the midst of that, rather than deepening their faith and their devotion to God, they just go through the motions of religiosity. That word akadia can also be translated as slothfulness, which is one of the 7 deadly sins. Apathy directly contradicts who we are supposed to be in Christ, diminishing our purpose. See, anything that opposes God or the essence of who we are as His people made in His image actually keeps us from Him. It's what the Scriptures call sin. And there are several factors that can lead to apathy. A lack of understanding of our purpose and identity, living in isolation, separated from community and meaningful connections, being overwhelmed and exhausted by the relentless demands of daily life, misalignment between our actions, our core values and beliefs can result in fragmented lives. Repeated experiences of disappointments and setbacks can cause a loss of hope. And these and more can lead to an apathetic life. But that's not how God created us to live. God calls us to a life of purpose and deep connection with Him and others. We've been looking at the letters to the Thessalonians because Paul is trying to help people who are overwhelmed with persecution. Some had even been killed because of their faith. They're new in their faith. Some were so eager for Jesus to arrive, to come back, to make all things right in this second coming of Jesus, that they'd stopped working. Others had heard that Jesus had come back and forgotten them, and now they were in despair. And so he's trying to right-size their view of reality, of who they now are, and how to live in light of suffering and challenges. Now, some of Paul's letters are circular. That meant he wrote it to be passed around from church to church. Others are more like a theological document like Romans. But these are letters to real people in response to letters from them. And you'll see in his words urgency, trying to help these friends who were slipping into indifference and apathy. So let's read the first couple verses of the 5th chapter in the first letter to the Thessalonians. He writes, "Now, brothers and sisters, about times and dates, we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night." Do you know anybody who thinks they know when the end of time is coming? Know anyone who's predicted Jesus is coming back on this date? I remember Y2K. Any of you remember Y2K? They didn't come back. Our computer still worked. Remember 2012, the Mayan calendar? I mean, in my life, there have been multiple predictions. And anytime someone gives a date, I already know that's not it. It's not it. No one knows. He's coming like a thief in the night. Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus is coming to rob us, like the reverse Santa Claus. A thief in the night comes when you least expect it. No thief writes a postcard, "I'll see you on December 8th. Put your stuff out on the stoop," right? I mean, how many of us keep our doors unlocked, our garage doors open at night? Okay, don't raise your hands. I don't want anyone to know where you live, right? Most don't do that, though, because we don't know when a thief is coming. So we lock up. We should lock up so that no one can interrupt, take from us. See, but what he's saying is that we do not know when Jesus is coming back. He'll come like a thief in the night. And so because of that, we need to have a level of expectancy, a level of urgency, expecting that one day Jesus will come back and he will make all things right. Verse 3, he continues, "While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape." See, he's reminding us that the return of Jesus is inevitable, and it's also unavoidable. It's inevitable. It's going to come at an unexpected time. It will be sudden. And we should be excited about that. And we should live knowing that it's coming. Now, there's this important distinction here. Because you may be thinking, well, it's already been 2,000 years, so when is Jesus coming back? It seems like it's taking quite a long time. There's a lot more things for Jesus to make right. Well, the reality is there's this beautiful verse in 2 Peter chapter 3 that says that a day is like 1,000 years to God, and 1,000 days is like 1,000 years is like a day. You see, time is different to God. He created time and space. He's outside of it and comes within it. And so time is different, but the reason that he's waiting to make all things right, to bring heaven and earth together, reunited, an experience where there is no pain, no sin, no tears, is he says he's waiting for those who have not yet said yes. That there will be a time when everyone who will say yes will have said yes, and then the end will come. But it says in that same passage that God does not want any to perish. He doesn't want any to experience life without him. On this side of eternity, and certainly on the other side of eternity. Jesus is coming back, and Paul's trying to warn them to live expectantly, but also to bring light and life to those around them that do not yet know of a loving God who's there for them. There's this important understanding of God. Some of us grew up with maybe some sort of religious background or perhaps a view of God that's really been tainted by the way our parents treated us or the way our parents talked about God or viewed God. But God is loving, so loving that he doesn't force us to do the right thing. So loving that he allows us to make decisions even when they do not turn out for our good. But then he's so remarkable and so amazing that even if we have terrible consequences for terrible choices, somehow when we turn back to him, when we surrender to him, he can actually bring good even out of the worst moments of our life. But the scriptures tell us that Jesus stands at the door and knock, and anyone who opens the door of their heart, he will come in and share a meal. It doesn't say that Jesus will kick down the door of the heart of the stubborn person. See, God would never make anyone spend time with him. God would not force anyone into an eternity with him that does not want to be there. So God's openness, his love, his kindness to us, which gives us freedom, sometimes I think too much freedom. How about you? In my own life or in the lives of people I care, I can see disaster looming. And there are times where a hard conversation could be what helps avert the disaster, but sometimes you can see people you love making decisions that the consequences are going to be really, really hard. Paul's warning them that this world will be filled with sorrow, that there's no promise of a life without problems. See, Jesus doesn't make your life better. He helps you come alive. He makes you awake. Let's keep going in verse 4. But you, brothers and sisters, you're not in the darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet. He's reminding us to live out what we say we believe, and knowing that we can actually pull that off with God's help. Paul is reminding them that they are in the light, and so they don't have to live in the darkness any longer. Those who are in the darkness are described as asleep. And most people sleep at night when it's dark. But we are not of those who are still in the dark. And yet, too often, people of faith stay in the darkness. See, our problem is not knowing when Jesus returns. It's actually about staying awake in the meantime, not becoming apathetic or lazy in our faith. Are you fully alert? I mean, I think if we're honest, when this passage reminds us that we need to step out of the darkness and mentions those who get drunk, it's easy to just point towards people who self-medicate with alcohol, that it's obvious that they're not fully alert. But the reality is there's lots of things in addition to alcohol that we might go to when we're overwhelmed. Rather than going to God, rather than going to the one who created us and gives us life and purpose, we can go to smoking or eating or even exercising. We can go to screen time. We can go to things like the television, things that could be good, but if we go to them as the source, we end up numbing ourselves and not truly living. If you find yourself self-medicating in any way, Restore on Monday nights can be a real part of your journey towards healing. Or finding a counselor, or jumping into a group, or all the above. Our world needs us to be the light we're supposed to be. Don't let circumstances dim the light in your heart. The point is, many who consider themselves followers of Jesus can fall asleep, can find themselves in the dark. Believers and non-believers alike can live life as if they're blinded. And none of this should surprise us. If we read the scripture, there's a description of darkness personified that blinds us. It says this in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So we can be blinded, and there are spiritual forces that want to keep us there. We can find victory in certain areas, but wounds from the past, if we're not careful, can actually cause us to self-sabotage our present and our future. But when we are fully awake, fully alive, letting others speak into our life, letting God guide us in every area, living out our purpose, then we can know that we're moving towards the life God has for us. There's this amazing moment in the scriptures where Saul, who was trying to kill people of faith, is blinded by a vision of Jesus. And for 3 days he could not see, and then he was prayed for. As he gives his life to Jesus, a man prays for him and he can see again. And he saw in complete different reality. He saw Jesus as the Messiah. Instead of going from town to town to imprison people and kill people of faith, he now went from town to town to tell everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike, that they are loved by God, that they can have a relationship with God through Jesus, the Messiah for all people. And we discover his job description that he passes along to every person of faith. Listen to what happens in Acts chapter 26 as he tells the story of his encounter with Jesus. Jesus saying, I have appeared to you to appoint you as a servant and as a witness of what you have seen and will see of me. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. See, we're invited to open our eyes. He will open our eyes when we ask him, when we surrender to him. And we're now to go and help others open their eyes to see life in the light. We're transformed by God and sent out to bring transformation to others through our actions and through our words. How we speak and how we live our lives. With a hopeful expectation that God will one day make all things right, that heaven and earth will one day be reunited. But between now and then, Jesus taught us to pray that his kingdom come, his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We can bring more of heaven to our part of the earth, where we live, where we work, with whom we talk to. In the first service, I met a guy new to church, first time here. Asked him how he found out about us. He said, Nate, the Uber driver, invited me. Even while you're at work, you can be a light. And this young man in the first service was emotional with the experience he had, knowing he's loved by God, that he's welcome here. He even confessed that he wasn't exactly sure all the details because he was a little inebriated that night when he got the drive. But he's loved by God. He's loved here. When our lives are marked by faith and hope and love, when we point people towards the one who loves us, the one who's transforming us, we beat back the apathy. We beat back the unhealthy expressions of anger. We beat back the anxiety. When we step into the light, we become fully awake. Paul is trying to say, stop living in your pajamas. Instead, be messengers of faith, love, and hope. And clothe yourself in the breastplate of love and righteousness and with the helmet of salvation. In other words, be ready for spiritual warfare. There is darkness that wants to divide you from your friends, from your family, from your spouse, from your kids, from your coworkers. And too often we are unwitting accomplices in the dark. We're not meant to live in the dark. We're not meant to experience death in relationships. We're meant to receive life and bring life. Because ultimately, the one who created us came and walked among us, living a perfect life, teaching with authority, loving those who were seen as unlovable, ultimately giving his life, dying on the cross for you and for me, taking upon himself the sins of humanity, and it killed him. But on the third day, he rose, and he's alive. And his Spirit comes to live within each and every one of us when we surrender our life to him. And he enables us to live lives in the light. Romans 14, Paul writes, if we live for the Lord. And if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Everything we fear is nothing compared to the one who created us. And to have a fear of the Lord, a reverence to see him as bigger and greater than all that we worry about and struggle with, right sizes our way of living. So let me give you 4 practical steps on how to combat apathy. First, remember who you are. Back to chapter 5, verse 5. You are all children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober, or sober-minded. We're children of the light. We belong to God. We need to stay alert and awake. But too often we forget who we are. Do you remember the movie Hook? I need more recent movie references. But this is a good one. There's a beautiful moment where Peter Bannon, played by Robin Williams, is there amongst the Lost Boys, and one of the smallest ones comes up to him and starts mashing his face. Do you remember that moment? And suddenly he says, "Oh, there you are, Peter." He could see that was Peter Pan. He'd gotten heavier. He'd forgotten who he was, the hero he was created to be. If you've surrendered your life to follow Jesus, you have been forgiven. You are now in the light. And yet over and over, Paul in his writings to real people in real churches would call them saints at the very beginning, to the saints in Corinth. And then he'd go on to write, warning them about having relations with their mom. You wouldn't think that would need that kind of warning, but they did. Warning them not to get drunk when they take communion together. But that was a thing. How could these be saints when they were gossiping and slandering and fighting and bitter and unforgiving? It's because they forgot who they were. Just like we can forget who we are. See, too often we relapse into our old way of thinking, an old way of living. We forget who we are. And if that's you, if there's an area of your life that you've taken back from God, you surrendered long ago, but you didn't like not having it, so you've taken it back. You can confess that to God today. Or maybe you've never began a relationship with God through Jesus. You can do that today. Just simply confessing, God, I need what Jesus did on the cross to count for me. I need forgiveness. I need your guidance. I need a new life. Help me wake up. Bring life. Or maybe that's something you need to renew. Frankly, that's something we need to do every day. Every day, confess, God, I need you. I am powerless without you. Help me live a new life today. And then when we slip back into the dark, we stop ourselves and think, wait a minute, that's not who I am anymore. It's a relapse. Who I am is actually someone who's loving and forgiving and kind and filled with peace and joy. By the way, if you're not sure what you need to work on, just talk to someone who lives with you. They might have some ideas to help you along the way. Remember who you are. Number 2, stay spiritually awake. Apathy can creep in when we stop spending time with God in prayer, in group, coming on Sundays, reading the scriptures, serving others with others. Every relationship drifts, every one of them. You'll drift apart from your parents, from your kids, from your siblings, from your friends, from your spouse, unless you're intentional, working through the conflict to come out healthier on the other side. Verse 14, we discover an interesting dynamic in the church in Thessalonica, as some were described as idle. It says, as we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle and disruptive, encourage the disheartened, help the weak, be patient with everyone. Some of them had stopped working because they were just eager for Jesus to come back. Things were so terrible. Jesus, would you just come back right now? By the way, this was probably a letter written about 20 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. And they were already ready for it to all be over. And so why work if Jesus is coming back any minute? And others just were so disheartened, so beaten up by life, things going so badly, they just were giving up. But what that created is people who were just living off of everyone else's generosity. I discovered this when I was in Los Angeles. I was in a group, there was about 7 of us, and all of us were broken. All of us were needing encouragement. All of us were needing hope. And what I discovered is if we all came needing something from someone else, no one left with anything better in our life. But when we began to take Jesus seriously, of what he said in Matthew 10:39, if you lose your life in serving others, that's how you find your life. It changed everything. If the 7 of us showed up with, God, I am in need and I need help and I need encouragement, but would you help me encourage at least one other person? Would you show me a need I could meet in the life of someone else? Not only could we meet the needs of the 7 people in our group, we could meet the needs of those beyond our group. When we begin to look at ways we can bring impact and kindness and goodness to others, when we lose our life in serving others, that's how we start to find our life. When we die to ourselves, that's how we begin to truly live. Number 3, encourage one another. I love this word, encourage. It means give courage to another person who needs it. Verse 11, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. The Thessalonians were going through an incredibly difficult persecution. Some of their own had been killed because of their faith. And he was encouraging not to take revenge. Continue to love. That's how the early church spread throughout the Roman world. And far beyond, it was through people persecuted, looked down upon, life in jeopardy, some killed, and yet they continued to love. And yet they continued to give. Yet they continued to serve. Around the planet, it was followers of Jesus that started hospitals and schools, that dig wells, that show up and meet needs of people in genuine need. We need to encourage people that it's not time to give up. To help us develop that zeal in our heart, regain that zeal. Surround yourself with people who are following Jesus that can encourage you and build you up. Be intentional about fostering those relationships that challenge you and inspire you. And don't be afraid to ask for help, to reach out for support when you feel disconnected. When you're away from the body of Christ, you're more likely to be vulnerable to being attacked. There's a great quote from the 1390s. Thomas Kempis, in a book called The Imitation of Christ, wrote this: God has so ordained that we may learn to bear with one another's burdens. For there is no one without fault, no one without burden, no one sufficient to themselves nor wise enough. Hence we must support one another, console one another, mutually help, counsel, and advise. For the measure of every person's virtue is best revealed in time of adversity. Adversity that does not weaken a person, but rather shows what they are. When things are at its worst, people of faith have the opportunity to rise up, to bring more of heaven to earth. But here's what happens is, if what he's saying is true, and we believe it is, we say no perfect people allowed. That means we will disappoint you. You will get hurt. It may not be intentional, but it will happen. We're broken people who are trying to find healing and trying to bring healing. And so when that happens, we need to learn to be honest, to have the hard conversations, to forgive. Now, forgiveness doesn't mean excusing someone's bad behavior, nor does it mean you allow them to continue to hurt you again. Forgiveness is actually about entrusting that person to God, not allowing them to continue to do what they've done to you, but if you were to re-engage, to do so with healthy boundaries, which could include a hard conversation if there's a safe way to do so. This means giving them a chance to know that they hurt you. It gives them a chance to apologize, to make things right, or to even get some help. And oftentimes that hard conversation can reveal a misunderstanding. The most effective hard conversations I've ever had, I try to assume the best in the other person, assume it was unintentional. And when I meet with them, I might say something like, you may not have meant this, but when you said this or when you did that, this is how I experienced you. I don't know how many times someone's either said that to me or I've said that to someone. It was all just a giant misunderstanding. It felt like the end of an episode of Three's Company. Just bad communication created all this drama and sad comedy. But if you aren't not in a position to have a hard conversation to share with them about how you experience them, forgiveness frees you from the power that they have over your emotions. And every time you think of them, you forgive them again, you entrust them again to God, and even ask God to help them experience his love and transformation. And finally, number 4, put on faith, love, and hope. Remember, Paul says in verse 8, but since we belong to the day, let us be sober-minded, putting on faith and love as a breastplate and the hope of salvation as a helmet. Together, the breastplate of love and the helmet of salvation strengthen our hearts and minds against apathy setting in. They remind us of our identity in Christ, our purpose in life, and God's profound love for us and for those around us. Everyone created in the image of God, everyone loved by God, everyone with the freedom to choose God. We're going to create just a little bit of space, just a minute or two of reflection. The band is going to play. After that, they'll lead us in a song. But I want you to just ask this question. Reflect in your own heart, or even ask God for guidance and wisdom. Are there areas in my life where apathy has crept in? Are there places in your life where you've given up? You've stopped dreaming with God. You've stopped hoping for healing or change. Just spend these moments, just with the silence. Connect your heart to God. Ask him to speak to you. God, show me where I've given up. Show me what I've been living in as if I'm asleep. Ask him to wake you up. Just take this time with him. Letter from Jude. But you, dear friends, by building yourselves up in your most holy faith and praying in the Holy Spirit, keep yourselves in God's love as you wait for the mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ to bring you to The band is going to play a song, More Time to Reflect. Remember, you are loved by God. If you've said yes to him, you belong to God. Whether you live or die, and your life matters. You have been created on purpose and for a purpose. There are people that God has brought into your life that you might be a light, just as he brought others into your life. Let God speak to you as the band leads us in this song.